Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today is part 2 of my look at Mutant Year Zero. Let's roll it. So last week I took a look at the traditional role-playing elements of Mutant Year Zero, and if you want to look at that review, you can look at the link below in the description. Today, I am going to be taking a look at the settlement building aspects of the game, as well as a meta game that kind of overarches the whole setting of Mutant Year Zero. Although if you're a player, really you should not watch that part of the video. That should be left for your GM. But let's take a look at the settlement building first. So as I alluded to in the first part of my review, in Mutant Year Zero, your party plays mutants of unknown origin. You don't know where you came from. You do know that you can't have kids, so that you're all young adults now, and there's this sense of impending doom unless your group figures out a way to keep your society going. You have been run by an elder who was a human, who never really told you about your past, but now he's getting very old and he's dying, and his control of the Ark, which is where you grew up, has now fallen completely apart. And this is where your party comes in. There is that sense of impending disaster coming, and the Ark has to figure out a way that it's going to build up itself so that it can survive. In the game, the way the mechanics work is this. You have something called development levels that are split into 4 separate areas. They are your food supply. That's so that people have enough to eat and therefore you can work on other things. Your culture, that is your expression of how your group functions and creates a shared identity. Your technology, which is not only what you can build inside the Ark, but also what you have a potential to understand when you encounter artifacts out in the zone. And warfare, which is the way that you defend yourself from potentially hostile powers, which are out there in the zone. So this is something that really needs to be built up as well. At the beginning of the game, your party starts with 12 dev points, and you're able to distribute them as you see fit in all the 4 areas. It's interesting because in each of the areas, you need 10 points to get to the second level of development. So unless you really want to go all in on one area at the beginning of the game, you're going to be very low in development in just about every area. And that creates some tension, and it gives a more gritty feel to what you're doing and really does provide a sense of accomplishment as you build up the nature of the Ark. So it's kind of cool. There are 2 ways for you to build up the dev level of the Ark. You have to get more dev points. And the projects can range from anything as simple as going out hunting to building a steam engine and even an actual train after you settle another segment of the zone later on in the Ark's development. So there's a whole wide range of things that you can do. And each project costs a certain amount of work points. The way that you determine how many work points a project costs is by taking the base, which is usually 1 or 2, and timesing it by the number of players at a table. So a party with 4 players and a project that is a base 2 work points would have to have 8 work points in order to complete a project. The way that you determine if a project gets done in any session is by a skill check. Every project has certain skills that are attached to it, and the players can roll on their appropriate skill with their dice. And every 6 that they get subtracts 1 work point to the total for the project. Once you get the total, the project is completed and the benefits of that project get added to the Ark. Really a neat way of dealing with settlement development, and really it gives the players some opportunities for role-playing inside the Ark itself, because there's intrigue and factions and people want different things, and maybe some NPCs are trying to sabotage a product, so you might have a combat encounter in the game. And at that point you have to determine, are you going to pursue this as a deadly encounter inside the Ark because your population is dwindling, and that could be a very bad thing. So it brings in all these different ethical elements as well to the game. So it's really rather fascinating. The other primary way that you can bring in more devs to the Ark is by bringing in artifacts and turning them over to what is known as the Dawn Vault. This is studied by a certain group of people inside the Ark, and they're supposed to be learning this and passing on knowledge to the rest of the people. And so if you get an artifact, whether you figure out how to use it or not, and you turn it over to the Dawn Vault, each artifact has a certain number of devs that go along with it, and once you turn it in, the bonus goes to the Ark. However, your character also doesn't have access to the artifact anymore, and some of these things can be pretty powerful and can contribute to your survival out in the zone. So again, there's that tension. Do I care about the community, or am I worried about my own hide right now? The world of Mutant Year Zero is a really bleak world, so you're going to be confronted with these types of ethical challenges left and right. So I think that settlement development is an interesting inclusion in the game. And if you have a party of a certain mindset, they might never venture out into the zone. They might spend all their time role-playing inside the Ark, trying to build up its development levels so they can get really cool things later on when they want to go out. And in addition to the building up of the Ark, there's also some simple mechanics for a mass combat where some enemy force out in the zone discovers the Ark and decides, hey, we want that. And so that's an interesting inclusion as well. This is kind of a neat aspect of the game. It might actually be, overall, one of my favorite aspects of the game, to tell you the truth. All right, if you're planning on being a player character for a game of Mutant Year Zero, you need to stop watching right now. You can have your GM come and watch this video. Like and subscribe. That's the first time I think I've said that on this channel, because what I'm going to be talking about now is the metagame, and this is something that the players are aware of. It's the mystery of where you came from and why you can't have kids, and really what your purpose as a people is. And the metagame deals with that. You have, even in the player section of the book, this idea that there's something called Eden out there. Although you don't know what it is, you have vague memories of it, and there's some vague stories that are told. And the metagame is how you discover that. Your people are the result of an experiment of creating a hybrid style of race that could survive in the ruined Earth. That's really what your goal is. But you were the first batch of the experiment, and the scientist who was in charge of the project in Eden decided that you were all too unstable to allow to live and wanted to euthanize all of you. But the scientist, one of which was the elder, decided that they didn't want to put you all to death, that they really cared for you and they thought that you had a future in the world. They actually mutinied and took you out of Eden one night, which is a scientific research base on the ruined Earth, and took you out to the Ark, which is where you grew up. You don't remember this, you don't know this, but this is where you came from. I don't remember if the scientist realized this or not, but as part of the project, you were all sterilized. Mutants cannot breed with one another. They can, however, breed with humans or a group of mutated humans that have grown up inside the ruined Earth called zone ghouls that everybody thinks are monsters, but are really just people that are trying to get along. So you could breed that way if you want, and then you could increase your population. And so that's part of the solution to the future of your people. When you pursue the metagame, your party discovers where Eden is. You go and explore. You find the remnants of the project that was there. Some offshoots of the experiments that you came from who were really messed up. And the scientist who wanted to kill you all, who has gone a little off the deep end at this point. Not that he was totally in the shallow end at the beginning. And you process through this whole thing, and that's where you get the chance. You can contact the remnants of human civilization in the stars and actually launch in a ship and go and join them. Or you can stay on Earth and help the Ark continue to grow. So that's kind of the general storyline of the metagame. The metagame is something that I'm torn about. The lore behind the metagame, the idea of the history of the enclaves of humans who survived after the apocalypse, and the people who came down to try to create a species who would be able to survive in the destroyed Earth, is really compelling, and it's fascinating, and there's an interesting story arc that goes behind it. And yet at the same time, this overarching meta-narrative that's thrust upon this game kind of takes it away from being my table. And in fact, the combination of the traditional roleplay and the settlement building aspect and this meta-narrative remind me of Skyrim. it makes Mutant Year Zero, the TTRPG, feel very video game-like. And that's something I'm a little bit conflicted about. While I could kind of take away the meta-narrative from the game, Mutant Year Zero, it's built into the backstory of who the mutants are and how the people came to be and what their problem is. They can't breed. That ripping it out just doesn't feel right. And in fact, it would cause more problems than it solves. And your players can do what some players do in Skyrim. They can just go wander around and do all the side quests and discover everything and never care at all about the metagame, and yet it's still there. It's never answered. The lore behind it is really interesting, but it just seems to impose something over the whole feel of the game that doesn't quite feel in place on a role-playing game. I just want it to be more open than that. So it's interesting if it's the style of game that you want to play, and this sounds really cool to you, like, oh wow, there's a mystery to solve. That's really cool. Go ahead and do it. But for me, it feels a little bit too board game-ish or video game-ish. And I kind of want more no-end-in-sight fun than that. So next week, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at the construction and design of Mutant Year Zero itself. I'm going to look at the book and the layout of the book and have my final thoughts on what I think about this game and would I play it myself. Until then, happy playing, everyone.